She drank hard, talked louder, and set every room on fire just by walking in. Tallulah Bankhead wasn't built to behave, she was built to burn. From scandals and stage triumphs to one-liners that could slice steel, her story is as wild as the woman herself. You've never met a diva like this. A Southern childhood full of loss and noise. Tallulah Bankhead was born on January 31, 1902, in Huntsville, Alabama, into a family that still carried the pride of old Southern aristocracy, even though the shine was already fading. Her father, William Bankhead, came from a long line of politicians and judges, and her mother, Adelaide, was considered a beauty of the Southern social circle. But the joy of her arrival was instantly followed by heartbreak. Just a few weeks after giving birth, Adelaide died from complications, chronic peritonitis, leaving behind a baby and a grieving husband who was completely unequipped to raise two daughters on his own. Tallulah's earliest memories weren't of lullabies or birthday cakes. She was baptized next to her mother's open casket. Her father was shattered by the loss. He swung between public duty and private despair, often retreating into drinking, unable to give his daughters the consistency they needed. He shuffled Tallulah and her older sister Eugenia from one household to another. Grandparents, uncles, aunts, none of whom had the patience or the understanding to deal with a child as restless and loud as she was. Even before she could form full sentences, Tallulah was acting out. Not in a cruel way, but in a desperate attempt to fill the silence left by her mother's absence and her father's distance. She climbed trees, jumped off roofs, shouted across rooms, and interrupted conversations, not because she wanted to be rude, but because she needed to be noticed. Her voice always carried farther than it should have. Her laughter was never quiet. Adults saw it as misbehavior. She saw it as the only way to exist. Her father adored Eugenia, the quiet, sweet one. Tallulah didn't miss the difference. It was obvious in the way he looked at them, the way he spoke to them. She grew up feeling like the spare, like the one who needed to earn affection instead of just receiving it. So she tried harder to be funny, harder to be bold, harder to shock. And when her antics got her into trouble, she didn't slow down. She escalated. If mischief was the only language adults listened to, she was fluent in it. There were attempts to rein her in. Her father sent her to a series of convent schools up north, hoping a change in environment would help. It didn't. At one school in New York, the other girls mocked her Southern accent, her loud voice, and her constant need for attention. When she stripped down and marched around the dorm just to get a reaction, the other girls didn't laugh. They shunned her. The teachers gave her punishments she didn't care about. She smoked behind buildings, climbed out of windows at night, and once threw an inkwell at a nun who tried to scold her. Every time she was expelled, another school took her in, and the cycle started over. Still, underneath all that chaos, there was someone trying to prove she belonged. Tallulah was constantly comparing herself to her sister, to the girls at school, to the glamorous women in the movie magazines she collected. She didn't think she was pretty enough. Her skin broke out, she gained weight, and she believed she'd never be the kind of girl who got noticed for the right reasons. But she wanted to be up there, on the stage, in the magazines, anywhere that promised attention on her terms. The turning point came not from kindness or structure, but from noise. One night after returning from a vaudeville show, her father had been drinking and invited friends over. Tallulah, barely 5 years old, stood up on the dining room table and performed a full routine, sultry voice, teasing lines, imitating what she'd seen on stage. The adults burst into laughter and applause. Her father looked at her with pride for the first time in a long time, and Tallulah felt something shift. The noise, the cheering, the way eyes locked onto her, it worked. When applause became a need. Once she understood the power of applause, there was no going back. Tallulah didn't just enjoy being the center of attention, she relied on it. That night in her father's dining room wasn't the last time she performed for a room full of adults. She kept doing it whenever she got the chance. Repeating lines from plays, mimicking movie stars, exaggerating voices, it didn't matter what she said as long as it got a laugh or a clap. She learned to hold a room before she knew how to spell performance. At school, it became a problem. Convent halls weren't built for girls like her. The rules were strict, and the walls echoed with silence. But Tallulah filled every corner with her presence. She cracked jokes during prayers, made faces behind teachers' backs, and turned punishment into performance. When girls walked into chapel in white veils for good behavior, she was the one wearing black. Her name was always on the bad conduct list, and she didn't try to fix it. Instead, she doubled down. She made up stories, acted out characters, and treated every school day like an audition. The girls didn't understand her, and the teachers couldn't control her. She didn't care. Being the outsider was still better than being invisible. Her humor became a shield, and her volume became a weapon. When she got in trouble, it was just another scene. But behind the jokes, there was always a need that went deeper than mischief. She didn't want to be average. She wanted to be memorable. She clipped photos from magazines of women like Alla Nazimova and Mary Pickford. She stared at them for hours, wondering if she could ever look like that, wondering if she had the kind of face people would remember. In secret, she tried poses in the mirror, testing smiles, angles, and expressions like they were costumes. Her skin didn't cooperate. Her weight fluctuated. Other girls at school made sure she knew she wasn't beautiful, at least not in the way they were. But she never stopped watching, never stopped studying what made other women unforgettable. She wasn't dreaming of being liked. She was studying how to be adored. Her father eventually remarried, and Tallulah hated it. At first, she mocked her young stepmother relentlessly, until the woman started helping her. She taught her how to take care of her skin, how to eat better, how to grow her hair out. Within months, the acne was gone, the weight dropped, and even Tallulah had to admit she looked different, more polished, more like the women in those magazines. Her family was shocked. She was still loud, still wild, but suddenly there was a kind of glow that hadn't been there before. She started carrying herself differently, still bold, still sharp-tongued, but with a bit more certainty. She had always believed she belonged on a stage. Now she started to look like someone who actually could be. That confidence wasn't handed to her, it was earned, and once she had it, she didn't let go. The teachers still sent home complaints. She still snuck out of dorms and cracked jokes that went too far. But she looked more like a star than a problem now, and people began treating her a little differently. Even her father noticed. For the first time in a long time, he didn't just see the troublemaker, he saw someone who might actually make something of herself. And then, one afternoon, while flipping through one of those movie magazines she had always idolized, she spotted something, a contest, a chance to be seen, a chance to finally be on the other side of the page. The mystery girl in the magazine. The photo wasn't planned, it wasn't polished. It was taken with a borrowed hat and a fox stole that didn't belong to her. Tallulah didn't have a professional stylist or a makeup artist. What she had was a face that looked different now, sharper, clearer, almost movie-worthy, and a desperate need to be seen. The magazine contest promised a part in a New York film. All she had to do was send in a picture. So she did, fast and full of excitement. In her rush, she forgot one very important thing: to write her name and address on the back. Weeks passed. She went back to clipping out her favorite movie stars and studying their poses in the mirror. The contest mostly slipped her mind until it didn't. One day she was sitting at the local drugstore with her sister Eugenia, flipping through that same magazine. Her fingers stopped. Her heart didn't. There, among the 12 winning faces, was her own photograph. Her picture printed across the page, sitting under the headline. "Who is she?" she screamed, loudly, then ran. She burst out of the drugstore and down the street, yelling at the top of her lungs, "I've won! I've won!" People stared, confused. Eugenia tried to catch up, holding the magazine, probably unsure if her sister was celebrating or losing her mind. But Tallulah knew exactly what had happened. She had been chosen. Her face had made it into print. The editors didn't even know her name, and she had still won. When the excitement reached home, the reaction was mixed. Her father didn't like the idea at all. New York? A teenage girl? He called it irresponsible. He said the whole thing was a joke, but Tallulah wasn't backing down. She begged, she cried, she shouted, she threatened to stop eating until she was allowed to go. She wasn't bluffing either. She truly believed this was the moment her life had been waiting for, and she was willing to drag the whole family through a storm to get there. Her grandfather, tired of the arguing, finally offered to pay for the trip. Aunt Louise, who had been dealing with her own heartbreak and needed a change of scenery, agreed to act as chaperone. The plan wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Tallulah packed her bags with clothes, magazines, and nerves and stepped onto the train like it was carrying her to her future. The ride to New York was long, noisy, and full of possibilities. She spent it thinking about who she might meet, what the studio would be like, how the lights might look on her skin. She'd practiced her smile in mirrors and mimicked the voices of silent film stars. In her mind, she was already part of the cast. The hard part, being seen, was already done. But when she stepped off the train, it didn't feel like a welcome party. There was no car waiting, no assistant with a clipboard, no studio rep holding her name. They went to the address listed in the magazine, only to be told the film project had been shut down. Production had stopped weeks ago. There was no movie. There was no role. Whatever prize she had won didn't exist anymore. Her aunt was quiet, maybe expecting tears, maybe expecting Tallulah to fold. But she didn't cry. She didn't pack up. She didn't act shocked or crushed. She just stood there taking it in, then said, "We're not going back." For her, the city was the real prize. The streets were bigger than they looked in the pictures. The noise felt like music. The buildings felt taller because they didn't belong to anyone she knew. It was terrifying. It was messy. It was exactly what she'd been chasing. So, with no script and no fallback, she set out to make New York notice her. Crashing into New York without a script. They checked into the Algonquin Hotel, and it wasn't supposed to be anything special. It was just where Tallulah and her aunt landed, a decent spot with available rooms and a restaurant downstairs. What they didn't know was that the Algonquin wasn't just a hotel. It was the meeting place for Broadway's inner circle. Writers, directors, critics, producers, they all passed through those hallways and dining rooms. Some lived there. Others stayed there between shows. And suddenly, without even realizing it, Tallulah Bankhead had moved into the middle of it all. She didn't recognize anyone at first, but it didn't take long to figure out the kind of people having dinner 2 tables over. They spoke loudly, smoked constantly, and threw names around that she'd only seen printed in theater columns. And she didn't just observe, she joined. She found excuses to say hello, slide into conversations, compliment a dress, or ask a question that made someone laugh. Most people would hesitate. Tallulah didn't. She acted like she belonged because she believed she did. It didn't matter that she wasn't famous yet. She had a presence. She had timing. And she had no fear. People started noticing her, even if they didn't quite know what to do with her. One day she'd appear at breakfast with someone important. The next day she'd be trailing behind a group of actors heading to a rehearsal, cracking jokes like she'd known them for years. She didn't wait for invitations. She inserted herself like punctuation. Her Aunt Louise tried to manage it. For the first few weeks, she kept a watchful eye, reminding Tallulah to be careful, to be polite, to not make a scene. But it was like trying to leash a lightning bolt. Tallulah didn't follow anyone's plan, not even her own. She stayed out late, drank things she wasn't supposed to, smoked in the bathroom, and flirted with anyone who paid attention. Louise, still grieving and emotionally drained, couldn't keep up. Eventually, she packed her bags and left. The family sent new chaperones in shifts. A pair of aunts came through, then a distant cousin. Each one lasted shorter than the last. No one could contain her energy or predict her moves. Hotel staff were asked to keep an eye on her. One manager famously replied, "I can either run a hotel or I can look after her. I can't do both." And he wasn't joking. Tallulah was now a teenage girl living on her own in New York City, but instead of floundering, she found fuel. The chaos made her sharper. The city gave her ideas. She started memorizing monologues and seeking out auditions. She knocked on the doors of small theaters, offering to read lines, help backstage, or stand in as an understudy. She didn't care about money. She often refused pay, saying it was too delightful to be paid for something she loved that much. She just wanted to be part of the scene, to be around the lights and the people and the noise. She got bit parts, nothing grand, but just enough to keep her moving. She stood in the background, poured drinks in cafe scenes, or delivered one-liners that no one remembered. But the producers remembered her. And when she wasn't working, she was still showing up, at rehearsals, at dinners, at rap parties. Sometimes even at cast meetings for plays she wasn't in. She built a reputation without even realizing it. Some people adored her, others rolled their eyes, but no one ignored her. One actress said, She had no filter, no hesitation, and absolutely no shame. If someone told her she wasn't invited, she'd say, "Well, I'm here now, darling, and stay anyway." She didn't try to impress people by pretending to be sweet or modest. She impressed them by being louder, funnier, and more alive than anyone else in the room. She had no formal training, no big connections, no credits to her name. But Tallulah knew how to create a scene, and in New York theater, that counted for something. She was trying to be remembered, and she was succeeding. Her name hadn't been on that first photo in the magazine, but now it was slowly starting to echo in the right places. A dangerous attachment in a new city. But then came George Napier, and for once it wasn't Tallulah doing the chasing. From the moment she met him, something in her shifted. He was everything she hadn't expected, a British aristocrat with soft features, wild eyes, and a history that trailed behind him like perfume and scandal. People whispered about his name long before he even entered the room. That only made him more interesting. Napier didn't chase her either, not really. He didn't need to. He showed up when he felt like it, said the perfect line at the perfect moment, and disappeared just as quickly. Tallulah was used to being the storm in the room, the one people had to adjust around. But with him, she felt like the one trying to keep up. He was elegant and chaotic at the same time. He flirted without effort and vanished without warning. She never knew when he'd call or where he'd turn up, but when he did, it lit her up like a stage light. Their first meeting didn't lead to anything official. That wasn't how he worked, but it was enough to hook her. She started showing up where he might be, laughing harder when he was around, stretching her words like she was performing just for him. However, Napier wasn't predictable. He'd go missing for days, then reappear like nothing happened, usually with some wild story and a thoughtful gift. A book she mentioned once, a cigarette case engraved with a half-joke, a scarf from a store she'd never be able to afford. And then, casually, he introduced her to his boyfriend. No warning, no explanation, just, "This is Edward." And Tallulah, heart-pounding, just smiled. She didn't leave. She didn't even ask questions. She laughed, shook hands, and pretended to be fine. She hoped it was a phase. She hoped she was still the favorite. She clung to every glance he gave her like it meant more than it did. She told herself it was complicated, that maybe he was confused, or maybe the rules were different where he came from. What she didn't tell herself, but probably knew, is that she wanted him anyway, even if he didn't choose her, even if he was never going to. She didn't want to be let go. She wanted to win, not just love, but him. His world, his chaos, his attention. He wasn't cruel, but he was careless. He didn't hide his other attachments, didn't cushion his disappearances with lies. He was simply himself, and Tallulah kept showing up for it. She told friends she was in love. They didn't know what to say. He had a reputation for leaving things unfinished, friendships, nights, relationships, and everyone around him seemed to understand that. Everyone except her. When he told her he was heading back to London, it felt like the bottom dropped out. She played it cool. She said she understood. But the thought of him leaving sent her into a kind of panic. She didn't want to go back to circling Broadway lobbies and small auditions. Not without him. Not with that empty feeling sitting in her chest. So she made a decision. If he was going back to London, she would too. She didn't tell him right away. She just started making plans. She called in favors, used every scrap of charm she had, and found a way to get herself across the ocean. When she finally told him she'd be coming too, he didn't react much. He smiled, maybe even looked a little surprised, but he didn't tell her not to. She wasn't following him in a childish way. She told herself it was about her career, about theater, about starting fresh. But deep down, it was about him. She wanted to be near him. She wanted one more chance to be the one he picked, to finally pull his focus from the rest of the world. Maybe she even thought that if she made enough noise, if she dazzled hard enough, he'd stop wandering. So she packed her bags again. This time it wasn't for a contest or a canceled movie. It was for something harder to define. She stepped onto the ship with more baggage than just her suitcase. She was chasing love, chasing reinvention, and chasing a version of herself that she hadn't quite figured out yet. Once in London, she found the stage and a whole new world to conquer. Performing and provoking in London. Her first move was to talk herself into a play that had already been cast. Literally, The role was gone, the production was locked, and no one had asked her to audition. But she showed up anyway, dressed to impress, voice turned all the way up, and confidence radiating off her like perfume. She cornered the director, Gerald du Maurier, backstage and said, "Well, here I am." At first, he brushed her off, politely, then less politely, but she didn't leave. She kept showing up, asking for 5 minutes, reading a few lines, making sure he saw her before every rehearsal. Eventually, he gave in, not because he ran out of patience, but because he ran out of excuses. She had something loud and strange and impossible to ignore. He gave her the part. Once the play opened, the audience reaction was instant. That voice, low, raspy, and full of trouble, cut through the silence like a knife. Her walk wasn't delicate. Her stare wasn't modest. She didn't try to charm anyone gently. She owned the stage like it owed her something. Within a few weeks, something wild started happening. Girls from the cheap seats began cutting their hair during the show and tossing it onto the stage during her curtain call, locks of shingled hair landing at her feet like fan mail. They weren't just watching her, they were becoming her. Off stage, she became a walking headline. She didn't change her behavior for the British crowd. If anything, she turned it up. Her one-liners turned into gossip column gold. "I'm a lesbian. What do you do?" she'd casually ask at parties just to see who flinched. She wore silk when people wore wool, talked during the serious parts of conversations, and told the press she didn't care what people thought of her, so long as they thought something. That attitude caught the attention of Olga Lynn, a well-connected socialite who had seen every type of actress pass through London. But Tallulah wasn't like the others. She didn't play coy. She didn't fake manners. Olga didn't try to change her spirit, but she did try to polish her around the edges. She gave her structure, what to wear, how to sit, who to meet. She cut the junk from her diet, forced her into proper fittings, and helped shape her wardrobe like it was part of the performance. Tallulah let her, not because she wanted to be someone else, but because she wanted to be the best version of whatever she already was. The result was explosive. She stopped being just the American girl with the smoky voice. She became that girl, the one on every invitation list, the one with 2 glasses in hand, one for drinking and one for waving around while telling a story. She was at the balls, at the dinners, at every late-night party where people stayed long after they were supposed to leave. Her circle expanded fast. Writers, lords, duchesses, painters, rebels. She could be wild one night and graceful the next. And somehow it all looked natural on her. People noticed how she moved through the room, not just who she was talking to, but who was trying to get close to her. She had no title, no fortune, no real resume, but she had presence, and that was often more powerful than any surname. As her public life soared, Napier faded. He was still in the background for a while, but his absence didn't bother her the way it once had. She was too busy, too surrounded, too adored. His unpredictability no longer held her in place. The stages, the parties, the headlines, they filled in all the places where his attention used to sit. She stopped waiting, and she stopped asking. But even in that whirlwind, cracks started forming. She was still young, still foreign, and still climbing. And London, for all its sparkle, could be cruel to women who didn't stay within their lines. The applause still came, but sometimes it sounded more polite than passionate. And even with all the lights on her, she started to feel the flicker of something colder at the edge. Career slips, rejection, and a close call. At some point, the spotlight she'd worked so hard to own started turning away. It began with Rain, the play Tallulah had her heart set on. She lobbied for the role with everything she had, letters, meetings, even a direct pitch to the producer. She could see herself as Sadie Thompson, loud, seductive, tragic. The role was made for a voice like hers, rough around the edges with something sharp underneath, but the answer came back hard and fast. They said she had no depth, no personality for the part, just flash, just noise. That one stung. She'd been turned down before, sure, but this was different. This felt like someone taking a knife to her sense of self and twisting it. She wasn't just being told no, she was being told she didn't have it, that she wasn't enough. That night, something in her cracked. She locked the door, shut out the noise, and swallowed a full bottle of aspirin. She wasn't trying to write a dramatic ending to her story. She didn't even leave a note. It was more like she wanted the world to pause, or stop spinning, or maybe just go quiet for a little while. When she woke up the next morning with a head full of static and a stomach full of regret, she didn't have answers, just a dull ache and the realization that she was still here. No one made a big deal about it, not publicly. Tallulah kept moving, and so did the gossip machine. But something shifted in her after that night. She didn't say it out loud, but the armor got heavier. The jokes got quicker. And the need to be taken seriously got louder. The universe, in one of its weird moods, gave her another shot. A small production lost their lead right before opening night, and they were desperate. Someone threw her name into the mix, mostly as a joke, but she said yes before they could take it back. And instead of playing it safe, she leaned into comedy, something no one expected from her. It worked. People laughed. The reviews didn't just praise her delivery, they called it refreshing, a comeback wrapped in a punchline. But success wasn't consistent. She still wanted more. She saw herself as bigger than London theater, and one role wasn't going to fix the emptiness that had crept in. So she reached for the impossible, Gone with the Wind. She wanted to be Scarlett O'Hara, not just wanted, needed. She campaigned hard. She had contacts, admirers, and name recognition. But in the end, she didn't even come close. The studio never seriously considered her. That rejection didn't just bruise her, it flattened her. She had pinned her next chapter on that film. And when it slipped through her fingers, the rest of her career started unraveling behind it. She was out of money. The parties got quieter, the invites slowed, and London, once her playground, started to feel like a closed room. She was emotionally spent, professionally cornered, and tired of pretending the walls weren't closing in. There were nights she didn't go out at all, which for Tallulah was unheard of. She stayed in with the curtains drawn, wearing old dressing gowns and replaying past performances in her head like she could rewrite them. She stopped picking up the phone, and when friends came knocking, she smiled too wide and changed the subject. It didn't help that offers weren't coming in. The producers who used to light up when she entered the room now looked over her shoulder. There was a new generation arriving, fresh faces, new talent, smoother edges. She didn't know how to shrink herself to fit into that world. And she didn't want to. But that also meant fewer roles, less work, more silence. Just when it felt like there was nothing left, Paramount called, out of nowhere. An executive had seen one of her shows years earlier and remembered her. Maybe it was the voice, maybe it was the madness, maybe it was just luck. But they wanted her in Hollywood, a clean slate, a bigger stage, and a paycheck that made her sit up in bed. She didn't ask questions. She packed what was left of her wardrobe, grabbed the furs and the feathers that hadn't been pawned, and left London behind. Hollywood tried to shape her, but she wasn't built for it. Paramount brought her in with a fat contract and big promises. 6 films in under 2 years, $200,000 in her pocket, and a fresh shot at stardom. The studios thought they were getting something electric, wild, and just dangerous enough to market. And they were right, except they had no idea how to handle it once they had it. From the start, she didn't fit. Everything about her felt too big for the screen. The camera was supposed to shrink people down, make them neat and controlled. Tallulah wasn't built for that. She spoke like she was performing for the back row of a packed theater, not for a microphone tucked under her collar. What made her magnetic in a theater seat made critics say she was too much on film. The same charm that made people cut their hair mid-show in London now got labeled as abrasive or unrefined. She didn't tone it down, though. If anything, she pushed harder. On set, she had opinions. On costumes, on lighting, on how her lines should be delivered. Directors weren't used to women telling them how to do their jobs, especially not women with southern accents and razor-sharp wit. And Tallulah never whispered. If something felt off, she said it, loudly. The real chaos started with one quote. During an interview, she was asked about her love life. She rolled her eyes and said, "I've had 4 abortions. You'd think I'd remember the men." That line exploded in the studio offices. They tried to clean it up, spin it, bury it, anything, but the damage was done. To soften the edges, they tried to package her respectably. Cue the marriage. She married actor John Emery, handsome and polished, someone who gave off just enough old Hollywood glamour to balance her wildfire energy. But it wasn't a love story. Not really. She once admitted he reminded her of John Barrymore, and maybe that was enough at the time. They smiled for the cameras, played the game. But behind closed doors, the whole thing just fizzled out. No fights, no headlines, just silence. Eventually, it ended like a scene with no final line, quiet and forgettable. The truth was, Hollywood didn't know where to place her. They wanted sexy but soft, powerful but polite. Tallulah didn't do soft or polite. Her style was too direct, too unscripted. She laughed too loudly, drank too much, and didn't care what people thought of her bedroom habits, or her drinking habits, or anything really. She would show up to parties barefoot or in floor-length fur, depending on her mood. One night she'd quote Shakespeare, the next she'd be dancing on a piano. That unpredictability might have made her a legend in London. In Hollywood, it made her a liability. But oh, the parties. Her house became the place. She wasn't just throwing parties, she was running her own scene. Actors, writers, musicians, and hangers-on flooded in. And in the middle of it all, there was Tallulah, champagne in one hand, wild-eyed, brilliant, untamed. Still, something was missing. She'd chased the big screen, but it hadn't chased her back. She knew it. The roles were drying up, the praise was thin, the money was fine, but the work? It didn't light her up. The cameras made her feel boxed in. The scripts didn't challenge her. The sets were cold. She missed the stage, the sweat, the risk, the applause that rolled through your body like thunder when you nailed a line. Film never gave her that. It couldn't. It was too safe, too clean. And Tallulah Bankhead was not built for clean. So, she walked away. The cameras had tried to shrink her, but the stage welcomed her back like she never left. And when she returned to Broadway, it was like striking a match in a dark room. Everything lit up at once. A return to form on the Broadway stage. And when she landed the role of Regina Giddens in The Little Foxes, it was like giving a blowtorch to someone who already liked to burn things down. The bitterness, the cunning, the cold fire under every line, it all flowed out of her like it had been waiting for years. She wasn't just back. She was untouchable. The public caught on fast. Her face landed on the cover of Life magazine, eyes narrowed, mouth curled, almost daring readers to look away. She looked like trouble. She looked like someone who knew too much and wasn't afraid to say it. And for the first time in a long time, Tallulah didn't feel like a relic or a cautionary tale. She felt current, loud, dangerous again. And she didn't stop, not for a second. In the skin of our teeth, she flipped expectations all over again. The play was surreal and chaotic, with scenes that jumped timelines and logic, but Tallulah held it together. Even when the script went into absurdity, people watched her like they were afraid they'd miss something sharp. She could deliver a line like it was a punch or a kiss, depending on how she felt that night. And the audience always came back for more. Then came Hitchcock. Nobody saw that casting choice coming. Lifeboat was a tense, claustrophobic film set on a raft in the middle of the ocean, and Hitchcock was known for picking people he could control. Tallulah, not exactly known for being easy to direct, but something about her worked. She played a wealthy, sarcastic columnist, basically a version of herself with slightly better posture, and she nailed it. Every eye was on her. Even in the tight quarters of a lifeboat, she filled the screen. She won Best Actress from the New York Film Critics Circle. Not for being subtle, not for changing who she was, but for being completely Tallulah. That should have been her Hollywood redemption arc. But instead of chasing more movies, she turned her energy back to the stage where she could control the chaos. She threw herself into Private Lives, reviving Noel Coward's comedy with a kind of reckless electricity that split audiences right down the middle. Every performance felt like it might fall apart, and sometimes it did, but no one walked away bored. Coward himself hated it. He thought she was turning his words into a circus. And he wasn't wrong. The show wasn't clean or polite. It was messy, funny, unpredictable. One night she came out in a costume no one approved. Another night she rewrote half her lines mid-scene just to see how far she could push it. And the crowd? They ate it up. Cities lined up to book the tour. Theaters sold out. Tallulah was giving them theater that moved. Theater that didn't sit still. She wasn't trying to be consistent. She was trying to be unforgettable. And she was. Off stage, though, things were noisier. Her personal life wasn't matching the highs of her performances. The nights were longer. The drinks were stronger. But on stage, none of that showed. Talking through the end. If anything, she kept performing. If a room had people, she had an audience. And when stages grew quieter, she found new ones: radio stations, television studios, talk show couches. She talked fast, sharp, and loud, like she was afraid silence might catch up to her. She hosted her own radio program for a while, and it was chaos in all the best ways. She laughed through the mic like the walls couldn't hold her voice. Listeners tuned in just to hear what unpredictable thing she'd say next. She teased celebrities, flirted with guests, and cracked jokes that left censors sweating. And even when her body started slowing down, her voice didn't. She once joked that she talked so much she probably hit 70,000 words a day. That number might not even be exaggerated, but behind all that speed was a woman worn out. Her drinking, already legendary, became routine. Whiskey in the morning, something stronger by night. She needed staff to help her function, not because she wanted to feel important, but because she literally couldn't get through the day alone. She relied on nurses, assistants, and close companions just to manage her pain, her medications, and the emotional weight that never really left. In 1952, she finally put it all on the page. Her autobiography wasn't a soft-focus legacy piece, it was raw. She wrote about miscarriages. She wrote about pelvic surgeries that left her with long-term pain. She didn't clean up the truth. She laid it out with the same dry bite she'd always used on stage. There were chapters where she admitted she hated herself sometimes, others where she joked through heartbreak like it didn't matter. But you could tell it did. The writing was full of heat and hurt and honesty. She told readers everything the press only ever hinted at, and she did it on her own terms. Tallulah was never afraid of death. That wasn't a metaphor. She literally said it. "I've always wanted death," she told one friend, and not as a cry for help. More like a strange kind of curiosity, like someone reading the last page of a book before starting the first. She wasn't dramatic about it. She just accepted that her life had always burned too fast to last long. By the mid-60s, her body couldn't keep up with her voice anymore. She looked smaller, weaker, but even then, she talked like she could outshout the end. There was no quiet decline. She was still tossing out one-liners, still snapping at nurses, still demanding better lighting in her bedroom like it mattered. And then, one day, it stopped. Her last words were exactly what you'd expect from someone who never gave a clean exit line in her life. Codeine, bourbon, not whispered, not weepy, just said, as if that was the final cast list, her two oldest companions. She went out like a line from a play. Not a goodbye, just a closing cue. And with that, the curtain fell on a life that refused to be quiet. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments down below.